Hello, and welcome back to the UAS Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Piekarski. Today we are joined by Ira Hughes, Director of Sales at Doodle Labs. Welcome to the podcast, Ira.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for joining us today. So, would you mind starting by just giving us a quick overview of Doodle Labs and what your relation is to the drone industry?
Absolutely. Doodle Labs has been a company for about 25 years. We started in 1999. Our founder and CTO, Nimish, started us off in really taking the 802.11 chipset and breaking the Wi-Fi compliance and extending it in a way that can work long range and can work outdoors really well. And he focused on the multi-point and point-to-point fixed wireless until 2008 when they really changed their focus on the OEM customers and our transceivers. And then over the years, we've continued to stack these technology developments on top with our different ways that we're able to harness that 802.11 chipset. We came out with our Mesh Rider radios in 2018, and then in 2020, the DIU sponsored our 6-band M1 to M6 radio that's used by the DoD and a number of other military forces around the world. And then in the last 4 years, we continued to develop on that and came up with the ability to do frequency shifting, which allows us to have multiple bands within different radios to be able to service both the commercial and the military with lots of different frequency options.
Okay, so Doodle Labs has been working in Ukraine. Can you tell us about the work that you've been doing in Ukraine with drone makers like Evolve Dynamics and UKR Spec Systems?
Yeah, great question. So that multi-band radio that I was talking about allows us to operate in several different channels, 1.6 gigahertz all the way up to 2.4 gigahertz. And what that allows us to do is get around some of those EW efforts or jamming efforts. When the drones are on mission, they're getting interfered with by different devices, jamming devices, and just other RF interference from potentially other drones that are in the air as well. And we came out with a software we call Sense, which senses the jam, and then it moves to an available frequency within the channel or changes channels altogether. And by having that 1.6 gigahertz all the way to 2.4, there's a lot of different options. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game where they're trying to chase what we're switching to as we're switching. So it allows them to complete more missions than they would without those types of technologies.
Awesome. Okay, so you're now responding to industry demand for an anti jamming radio specifically for FPV drones. Why have FPV drones become the most used drone in the Ukrainian conflict?
That's a great question. So the Nimble, which what you're referencing is this new way that we're going to market with the standard way we've been utilizing that 802.11 technology. The only difference with Nimble is we're taking the Mesh Rider OS, which is this kind of the secret sauce, the proprietary way we use the 802.11 protocol to be able to do that long range and operate in harsh environments. And we're just packaging up that OS and we're allowing it to run in a shared compute. So saying it works on FPV drones, some FPV drones, but as we start to figure out what that looks like, we are also working on trying to find good encoders that can reduce that latency, which is glass to glass time. The answer to your second question, though, is really about why are FPV drones so impactful? The answer is they're super capable when it comes to agility, and they can be very accurate at range and be able to deliver a very precise payload where needed. Typically, though, what we're seeing with the FPV drones is analog is still winning. Analog, you can just put a high power amplifier on them or high power video transmitter and send them long range. And they're so quick that when they do get jammed, their default is really to go to full power and try to get out of the jam, which allows them to get control or visibility back of the craft and finish mission. So there's definitely been a interesting effort when it comes to being able to deploy different tactics within that war that we haven't seen before.
Very interesting. Okay. So, how is the radio that you're developing for FPV drones different from the radios that are already being used in other drones in Ukraine?
Yeah, great question. So I would say when you're looking at a standard FPV drone, the difference is they broadcast an analog signal that anybody can pick up. So it's not secure and it's also visible to anybody. So if you can figure out what channel they're operating on, you can simply tap into their video feed. Whereas with having a radio like ours, having the IP capability as well as the encryption capability to keep that signal secure, we're able to offer a different type of link than they would otherwise have with analog. We're also able to access into HD cameras and bring the resolution of that image up for them. But again, our radio isn't focused 100% on FPV. It's also focused on those other small drones that are similar to, say, a Mavic that have some other similar control. You could use it for FPV, but with the latency, you need a little bit more control than the standard acro mode that they fly in, where they control all of the attitudes at any second.
Great. So, when do you expect to bring your FPV drone radio to market?
Yeah, absolutely. The Nimble radio will be first deployed on the x86 architecture. Like I mentioned, it's really about wrapping up that Mesh Rider OS and being able to deploy it on different companion computers and that shared compute model. So if you think about different drones that have a x86 processor as their core, or even we're starting to look at Raspberry Pi to be able to deploy it on, or the Jetson or a Nano are two of our future targets as well in the near future that we'll be able to run our specific OS on, as well as them running all of their different types of flight controls and different flight systems on as well.
Okay, so it's my understanding that in addition to military applications, drones with Doodle Lab radios are also being used in commercial and public safety settings. We're hopefully nearing the end of this summer wildfire season. Can you talk about the work Doodle Labs is doing with fire departments and the U.S. Forest Service in California?
Absolutely. So Doodle Labs is focused mostly on drones and robotics, but we also have what we call our wearable radio that just came out within the last year. And departments like Corona Fire have been able to use that to do what we call connected teams. And so the drone can have a Doodle Labs radio in it for control, but also the people on the ground can have Doodle Labs radios on them, which gives them the ability to tap into a system like ATAC to give location and other information while they're out doing potentially a search and rescue where they don't have standard connectivity. Maybe they don't have cellular in those ranges. And then we foresee where the full connected teams system could be, in different aircraft, in different ground units, as well as the people walking around being able to really give entire situational awareness to the entire team so that everybody is in communications, even when, like I said before, they're in a non-covered area by traditional types of connectivity.
Thank you. Are there any other sectors within the drone industry that maybe Doodle Labs is looking into or that you're particularly excited to get involved with in the future?
I think with the upcoming potential DJI band that's looking more and more possible, we're starting to see a very large uptick in companies that believe that they can fill that hole. And we're starting to talk about really large numbers from some of these manufacturers and utilizing the Doodle Lab radios to be able to offer a DJI type competitor. And I think that's really exciting as we start to see that market evolve if the DJI band does happen. On top of that, it's just fun to see the different types of applications that drones are being utilized for and the different ways that people are building the drones. My passion is technology, and I'm also a FPV pilot. I log an hour or two a week in the goggles. Just absolutely love flying, racing, doing all types of different things with drones. And I'm kind of a kid in a candy shop right now, just being able to watch all these different systems be developed. And it's been a lot of fun to be a part of Doodle Labs and watch this industry evolve.
Great. Well, thank you, Ira. Again, today we are joined by Ira Hughes, Director of Sales at Doodle Labs. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close things out, Ira?
Absolutely. If you're looking for a radio that can go into, again, focusing on drones, robotics, any types of drones, we have a very low swap, size, weight, and power footprint. And we're in a number of different regions around the world and just super excited to be a part of that. If you're curious about all the different offerings we have, I'd love to talk to you guys if interested.
And where can our listeners find out more information to contact you or just learn more about Doodle Labs?
Great questions. It's simple. Just go to doodlelabs.com. There's an information area where you can submit a form and get in contact with us, or just shoot us an email at sales@doodlelabs.com.
Great. Thank you again, Ira. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you or your company is interested in recording a podcast, please contact UAS Magazine. And for more podcasts like this one, visit uasmagazine.com and subscribe for industry news. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode and look forward to next time. Until then.